This podcast contains bones, blood, smut, and swear words.
Act 1. Welcome, penitents. Hello and welcome to The Frontline Fifth, a Lock Tomb podcast where brand spanking new novitiates explore the Lock Tomb series for the first time, while a couple of dried out bone witches cackle over how little they really know. We're currently reading Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, and this week we're taking a quick break from listening to the soothing sounds of skeletons being pulverized just off screen to talk through chapters 13 and 14. I'm Hannah. But before I get out my notebook of architectural sketches to lead us through this maze, please allow me to introduce my co-host, who woke up this morning just early enough to catch me counting all the doors in her house. It's Marie. Marie, if it was Marie talking time, what one question would you ask Harrow Hark Nonagesimus?
I would ask, had she ever considered just muffling a little bit if she's so insistent on being sneaky? Just muffle the bones, just slightly.
That's less of a question and more of advice, but it is good advice.
I cannot believe I am that person.
It happens to all of us.
Hey, I think that's amazing. This is why I need you in my life. All right. Also with us today, the Cavaliers we keep trying to ditch so that we can play with our skeletons on our own down in the dark. It's John and Brooke. No, I'm just kidding. I would always drag you along on my shenanigans. Brooke, John, imagine you just rescued Harrow in a bizarre bone cocoon in a strange subterranean facility. What are you asking her?
I'm going to be asking her if the guy who was measuring the size of her bone cave is a pervert.
I feel compelled to point out that Brooke wants the audience to know that she is supposedly the prude.
But she's the only one who's been making sex jokes this entire time.
No.
Dear listener, this is the woman who defaults to fuck in Fuck, Marry, Kill, Resurrect.
Oh, we're fucking Magnus Quinn. He's Magnus. This is excellent. Fuck a Camilla. No, wait. I already fucked Magnus. Shit.
Comes up with magazine titles like
Magnificent Sheaths.
No.
has interesting vacation habits
I think I'm getting the penis museum in Iceland mixed up with whales made in Iceland.
and makes comments like,
The hyena apparently has quite a clitoris.
Wow. And they're screamers.
but yes, I'm sure that she's actually a prude.
I'm just saying.
It's been mostly completely inadvertent.
All right, John, what are you asking Harrow?
It's definitely going to be an 80s like action line. Like it's got to be something that was possibly uttered in like a Arnold Schwarzenegger necromancer movie at some point. So like, I don't know, something about being still caterpillar or like a necropillar. I don't know. There's something in there where she's like, she has not transitioned into a butterfly.
You said in one of those 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger necromancer movies, but I don't think those exist.
Sorry, combining things. 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, necromancer quip.
The Venn diagram in between.
Got it.
The non-existent Venn diagram.
Now that deepfake technology is as good as it is, I feel like we should be using it to make our own version of Gideon the Ninth starring people that we're interested in. And I think Arnold Schwarzenegger is a good pull for like Crux, maybe.
No. Poor Arnie.
I will drag you down the stairs.
Clearly, none of us are going to learn a lot from the Reverend Daughter by asking outright. So let's just dive in head first and see what we can learn in the facility. But first, if you had to sum up this week's chapters in a terse, nonagesimus non-answer, what would you say?
I think we're starting a puppet show.
I was going to say Bone Storm, but that's a deep cut for like the 20 people that might have played World of Warcraft that will eventually listen to this podcast. So I'm just going to say intriguing.
I like Bone Storm better. I don't know what that means, but it's fun.
I was going to say, I don't feel like I need to know anything about World of Warcraft or Bone Storm to immediately conjure up a lot of different things.
I guess Griddle could swing a sword after all.
And I'll say, Ghost and You Might Die is my middle name. So with that...
That's not Harrow's line.
You're absolutely right. All right, what's a good kind of like Harrow energy? I think I'll just say, paint your face adequately.
In preparation.
Let's pull out our knuckle knives in case we meet a bone monstrosity as we present Episode 7. It's Gideon Nav talking time. Act 2. All mummification and no meat.
This section of Frontline 5th is safe for anyone who hasn't read past Chapter 14 in Gideon.
Let's recap. Chapter 13. Gideon Nav wants answers. Harrow Hark debuts her Map of Many Doors. Harrow takes Gideon along for the ride. Chapter 14. Harrow skeletons can't hack it. Gideon fights a bone monster. The test was inside you all along.
All right, let's talk about what happened. Chapter 13 picks up really, really smoothly from where we left off in Chapter 12, right? Harrow was passed out in the facility. Gideon rescues her with the help of the 6th. And we start with Gideon carrying her half-dead necromancer back through the halls of Canaan House to the 9th quarters. And, she basically puts her in bed. She's like, what the fuck do I do now? Do I pour water on her? What is rehydration? And waits patiently for, any acknowledgement that she just saved her life. But Harrow is literally just pissy that they looked weak in front of the 6th house.
I'm not as competitive as this. I really am not. I cannot understand that level.
I mean, we can get into this at some point. I also just don't understand why they all think that it's a competition anyway. There was one rule, which was don't go through doors without permission. I don't know why they've all decided it's Hunger Games. There were no specifics given, but that's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. In theory, they can all win.
Thank you. In fact, the original letter from the Emperor clearly states that he's hoping to have 8 new saints. They certainly can all win.
Yeah, but if there's going to be 8 of you, there's probably a ranking. You've all been living in your own worlds, your big fish in your little ponds, and suddenly you're around a whole bunch of other big fish from their little ponds. Now, who's the biggest fish?
Apparently we have the world's greatest fish, and then somebody who also thinks they're the world's greatest fish, supposedly.
So you're right, I understand. But Harrow basically is just being pissy, not giving any answers, and Gideon is absolutely fucking not. She says she wants answers, and she wants them yesterday. And she's pushing Harrow, and finally Harrow eases up just a little bit and starts to explain. And the first thing she does is remind Gideon of that one rule for the Lictor Challenge, right? It was given to them by teacher day 1, do not open doors without permission. And she starts there, and Gideon's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And Harrow explains that she has mapped all of the doors that she could find in a little notebook. She's got these architectural sketches of Canaan House. It's this fat notebook with tons of pages, careful, spidery little handwriting. She currently has counted 775 doors, which is wildly impressive.
Can I just say the things that I find the funniest in that whole thing is she asks Gideon to think back to the first day, and Gideon is thinking back to assholes and astringent tea.
But I think this is telling. This is exactly Gideon has a weird tea party and goes to bed. That's her first night in Canaan House. Harrow watches everyone incredibly carefully and then spends 8 hours that night counting 200 doors.
Right.
It's a very different experience.
Right. Also, her notebook, what is it bound in?
Human skin, and guess what all the text is written with? Her own blood, skeletonized, apparently. Ugh.
See,
Gross.
this is why I think she's so cool.
Do they not have ink?
She has a pencil.
The amount of iron and supplements she must take, they go through blood so fast.
Graphite smudges, ink bleeds, blood skeletonizes. It's very sturdy substance, apparently.
You think blood would bleed too, but...
John.
They keep on using the word skeletonized, which I don't think is actually a word associated with blood necessarily in our world, but that's perfectly fine. What I think is funny is that literally in chapter 1 or 2, when we first meet Harrow, Gideon mentions this because she does this thing where she pokes a pen into her cheek in order to actually get blood and sign her name. And Gideon calls it her party trick. So I think Harrow does just making everybody else feel completely terrified and grossed out. I respect it.
There's clearly no spicy food on the 9th because her mouth would hurt all the time.
Ow.
Oh, yeah.
Have you had mouth sores?
Yeah.
I mean, basically, they eat snow leeks I think there's no second meal on the 9th. In any case, all right, so Harrow's got her map. She's got 775 doors, and literally only 6 of them are locked. And she explains to Gideon that after she counted her first 200, that very next morning in Canaan House, she goes to teacher and asks permission to enter the locked doors. Because in fact, that one rule was sort of a clue. It was a hint. It was a go find locked doors and get permission to go through them, right? So teacher gives her the key to the hatch, which leads to the facility, provided she has a safe place to put it, which is that key ring that was given out to all the Cavaliers. And for the other door she asks about, he says that it wasn't his and he couldn't in good conscience give permission. All the while he was winking at me so hard I thought he had suffered a stroke, which is also just, again, my deep love for teacher.
It's starting to feel kind of like a Nancy Drew video game.
There was a Nancy Drew video game?
I think that was probably a very specific niche for me.
Tell me more, Brooke.
They were a couple. They were fun. But yeah, you had to do things in a very specific order, discover the clues in a very specific order in order to unlock doors.
I love it.
Oh my god, there were so many of them. What? There were 33 of them. How is that possible?
I feel like I was missing something in my childhood that I didn't know that this even existed.
I'm sorry, my dad was a software game designer, so
They
I
made
got
one
a
for
little
the
bit of
Wii?
a insider look at this when I was a kid. They were very fun and very frustrating. I don't think I actually finished the ones that I had because I got stuck. I was like 8.
Fair enough. But you got to go up to someone like teacher and be like, give me a key. And he goes, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Eventually that wink becomes infuriating. NPCs. Anyway.
So Harrow now has the key to the facility, and we know that Gideon hasn't seen her in days. And that's because Harrow has been spending all of her time down in the facility, which Harrow says is old. That facility is old. It is older than Canaan House. It is pre-resurrection.
Is that disagreeing with what Palamity said?
So we know that upstairs, like just above the facility, Palamides and Cam were dating things at 9,000 years old all the way down to like 50.
Oh, and then the limit was 10,000, which happens to be, as far as we're aware, around the resurrection, given that's the age of the lictors.
So I think like upstairs, they've been careful to say there's stuff as old as 9,000 years old. Harrow's sort of intimating that this may be even older than that.
So they built the house on top of the facility, not the other way around.
Potentially, yeah.
Ooh.
It's not totally clear what the point of the facility is. Like, is it just this antique place that exists for itself, or is it actually trying to teach them something, or are there things to find down there? Harrow explains that whoever used to use the facility left behind kind of pre-rigged tests or challenges, and you can trigger these tests. So Harrow has been down there trying to work out the parameters of one specific test for like days now.
I will say, when they started talking about this, I was like so confused. What did this mean? Now, having read the chapters, makes perfect sense. But initially, I was like, what does that mean? Left behind, triggering tests. Felt really creepy.
You know, this literally goes back to like our chapter 1, chapter 2 thing where like Tamsin like builds a thing up. You're like, I don't understand what this is. Why are you talking about this? And the next chapter, it's like, boom, pays off. Yeah. Yeah.
Skeletons out of the ground.
Unapologetically in your face about world building. Like we were talking about this last night, Hannah, where it's like the difference between this and like Brandon Sanderson or something, where it's just like,
yeah,
you were going to get 14 pages describing the food and the fashion of everyone at this party. And meanwhile, it's like, here's 2 paragraphs. Sorry, that confused the hell out of you. Like, we're moving on. Like, it'll make sense later.
Yeah, it's a very different, John, you're absolutely right. So we were saying that Brandon Sanderson, whom I love, is like an over-explainer, and he explains all the details of the politics of the world and all the details of like the magic of the world, whereas Tamsin Muir is just like, figure it out, bitch. Which I love for her, so that's great. And Gideon, like in my opinion, in this chapter, in chapter 13, Gideon is kind of like interested but confused and doesn't ask follow-up questions because she's like, this is nothing. So she's just like flipping through Harrow's little notebook on her own. And she comes across a sketch of an animal skull with long curved horns, just like the one that she saw in the carvings over that secret door that we were talking about. And it actually turns out that it was like a door that Harrow had not figured out. And so it gets added to the map and Gideon gets to feel that glow of like, I helped.
I think that Harrow's reaction to that is interesting, though, because it's almost like Harrow was expecting there to be a door that she missed there.
Yeah. And then I'm now realizing we don't talk about this anymore. And she's just like, ooh.
No, I kind of agree with it. Also, she numbers it 203 despite already having 700 doors.
That's intriguing.
She also says that there's 3 levels.
Oh, so maybe it's a location-based coordinate system.
Yeah, I think it's 200 because it's
It's like hotel floors.
It's on level 2. Yeah, I think that's why it's
Oh, yeah,
203.
and there are no, she said basically it's like a giant lobby on that floor or something, maybe.
Yeah,
Is that
well,
the
she
right
also
one?
says there's like mezzanine, there's like terraces that she doesn't think have anything to do with anything. And it's kind of like there's like levels that are like above and below. Basically, like the middle level is mostly there to get you to like the upper and lower levels.
I mean, clearly, so we've talked about this a bunch, but clearly Canaan House is enormous, right? There's like an incredible, incredible wealth of doors. And there's something really interesting about so few of them being locked. Basically, all this cartography is making Harrow tired, and she basically is like, I'm going to pass out again. I'll see you later. And Gideon says, no. You don't get to make the rules anymore. It is Gideon Nav talking time. Basically, she says, 1, you got to stop keeping me out of the loop. And part of why you have to stop keeping me out of the loop is that you're making me look like a disloyal buffoon, right? That the baseline standard for a cavalier is not letting your necromancer die alone in a bone down in the dark, not even knowing they're there. She said, you have to stop making me look like such a shitty cavalier, which I think is an adorable reasoning. It's just, it's time for Harrow to cool it with all the solo shit and admit that the entire point of having a cavalier is so you have someone to help you. It also doesn't help that Gideon's just fucking bored. Gideon would just like to be part of whatever's going on. So what do you all think about this plea?
I think it makes sense, especially to Harrow, because she's all about keeping up appearances, and pretty much every other necromancer is, or I guess the other way around, every cavalier is attached to their necromancer at the hip, or I guess 2 steps behind their hip, or whatever it is. If we're keeping up appearances and we're setting up we're lining our housing with bones to keep up appearances and for ambiance, we need to have the ambiance of a cavalier too, like as part of the process. So I think that's a good way to appeal to her.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect is Harrow picks up on everything that teacher said she considered a clue. And one of the things he was saying at the beginning was, you have to do this with your cavalier. You can't do this without your cavalier. You're connected. You're part of a team. And if one of you fails, the other of you is to blame. And so I'm sure she kind of was trying to ignore that. And when it's really confronted with her and she's kind of in this vulnerable state, she starts to see a little sense that one starts tickling at her a little bit more and she's willing to give in.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. And I think this is kind of like a flaw of Harrow's is to do this thing where she picks up on the little secrets, but only the ones that sort of suit her agenda anyway. She's like, hidden doors. I'm all about hidden doors. I don't want to take Gideon with me, though. I do think it's interesting from Gideon's perspective, though. I realize Gideon is totally bored, but ostensibly Gideon hates Harrow. But I think we're learning that their relationship is more complicated than that. She wants to be part of whatever this is, partially because it's just fucking weird and wild, and she wants to be part of it. Harrow gives in. She acquiesces. She says she's going to take Gideon with her, exploring in the facility. But she does say that teacher warned her intensely against going in the facility at all. He said, down there resides the sum of all necromantic transgression, the unperceivable howl of 10,000 million unfed ghosts.
Gideon tells her, oh, you're full of bullshit. She goes, that's not mine. That's what teacher told me.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's really interesting because just the phrase necromantic transgression, and then also just unfed ghosts, because we've already gotten to the point where they can kind of pull spirits back, right? That was one of the things that they've mentioned is you can sort of pull people back from the dead, which means that their spirits go somewhere, right? And where do they go? We don't know yet, but there is somewhere to pull them from. This does fit with my conspiracy theory that maybe this is the origin of all necromancy down here, or there's something to do with it. I don't know. That line it was very not goosebumpy, but goosebump adjacent.
It was goosebumpy for me.
They're going to go down there anyway.
Luckily, Ghosts and You Might Die is Gideon's middle name. So the next morning, the two of them sneak down to the facility. And I love this. They really do sneak. Harrow insists on them like sneaking around corners, and if they see anyone, they stop and stay there for a really long time.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is like some sort of like anti-necromancy tactic, because like multiple times people have picked up on Gideon's presence even when she wasn't visible. And so like if you're trying to sneak through a house and you're around all these other necromancers, it feels like there's a range at which people would be able to detect your presence. But maybe if you're super, super still for like a long time, which feels very like not human-like, like maybe a necromancer who's like, that feels like there's a living thing over there, but like maybe I'm just picking up something kind of noisy. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's dead.
T-Rex necromancers, they can only see you when your bones are moving, even though that's not a thing.
But I also think it's interesting, like, I mean, at some point, like, who cares whether a necromancer sees you? But this is like part of what Harrow said, is that she got a head start day one. She counted 200 doors. But she says other people were out there day one looking around the house too, right? She knows that Palamedes and also Silas were out. She's not at all sure about the third house twin.
Wait, who's Dulcinea's cavalier again?
Protesilaus.
He also showed up and like said something to Dulcinea in a few chapters back of "it is locked" or something like that. So
right.
I'm not sure which one he found that's locked. Maybe that one.
A lot of people are actually up and at it trying to like get at this, and Harrow does not want them followed. They head down into the facility. They head to Laboratory 2, in which they find the transference/winnowing data center. Basically, there's a long room with a window along the length so that you can see into a chamber that's labeled response, which seems to just be a bare room with a shit show of bone on the floor. Gideon's words, not mine. And then there's also a door to imaging. Brooke, you had a note here. Do you want to...
Oh, yeah. There's also a skull with no mandible mounted above the door, and that is a Ninth House reference. I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but you say Tamsin Muir tends to be deliberate.
So there is like this like potentially Ninth House skull above the door. And at the very, very least, that's consistent with this thing of like the only real human touches are bone decorations. Everything else is very sterile, very lab-like. All right, so Harrow leads them into imaging, where there's this pedestal topped with flat glass, and Harrow puts her hand on the pedestal, everything buzzes to life, glass folds over, the door slams shut, and the response door slides open. And we learn that Harrow has been literally spending all of her time down here just sending skeleton after skeleton after skeleton into the response room to face something that she cannot see. The only thing she can do is hear them getting pulverized. She has no idea what's in response.
Kind of the way it's written sounds like she's like in like a lot of pain or like discomfort when she's got her hand on that. There's like all these words of the way she's talking. She's like very tense. And then the second she like releases her hand from it, she's like all sprightly and stuff like that. I feel bad. Like, oh my God, if I were Gideon, I would be like, oh my God, you've just been down here torturing yourself.
I think it could be just because it's like she's putting so much of, like, we know that necromancy takes a lot out of her. And I think it's just that she's putting so much energy into the skeletons that's what it is.
I don't think she had a skeleton that she had summoned, even when she was just demonstrating it. I just felt like it was, I don't know. I'm worried for Harrow.
I mean, I think Harrow is a tense person either way. Yeah, I mean, we're worried for everyone. But I'm with Marie. I think that most of it is just that she's just been like, she has been pounding it, skeleton after skeleton after skeleton after skeleton, and she's exhausted. She literally brought herself to the point of passing out. So she sends Gideon out to watch what happens. And I wrote in our show notes that I'm not even going to try to describe the construct that emerges. And I believe, John, you must have put this picture in response. Is that true?
Yes. This is what I was picturing the whole time, was something very similar to this. For the Venn diagram of World of Warcraft players and people that listen to this podcast, this is Lord Marrowgar. You can look them up, but it's basically the first boss of a almost necromancer-themed raid that's in World of Warcraft. So at least like this immediately what popped into mind. It just looks like this is how I picture it. Nobody else can see it, obviously.
No, and I will say, so like in this picture, it's clearly kind of like it's got a glowing energy. It's got bones everywhere. It seems like it has many arms, and they're all covered with bone spikes. And that's actually something that is explicit in Tamsin Muir's description, is that it has like tibial spines all along its many arms, and that each end of the arm comes to a sharpened radius, so it's like a blade.
So what is the intersection of our timelines with World of Warcraft and Gideon the Ninth?
Well, we found out last night, actually, Hannah and I were looking, My conspiracy theory was that Tamsir definitely played World of Warcraft because she was a online person from New Zealand in the early 2000s, and I feel like I've met so many New Zealanders that have played World of Warcraft. I assume that she did, and then we found out that she's written a fairy tale for the World of Warcraft fairy tale books as like part of her thing. So I'm going to assume that she's played it.
She's literally written for World of Warcraft. Yeah,
this visual that you posted, we should provide a link for it in show notes or something like that.
Yeah.
But this visual is a far better representation than anything my imagination was able to come up with, and so therefore I can imagine a world in which you're not too far off from providing this.
This guy also yells "Bone Storm." That's where. That's like one of his
It's all
attack
coming
lines.
Together.
He like spins in a
It's all
circle
coming
around
together.
the room yelling "Bone Storm." It's like a super iconic line, just screaming "Bone Storm." Anyway.
Well, basically, all of Harrow's skeletons are getting caught in this bone storm, one after another, right? Like this enormous, crazy skeletal construct that is, and one thing I will say is that it's pretty clear that it's not necessarily based on like a human skeletal format, right? It's got many arms. It's got kind of scorpion tail shit going on. It's not necessarily got the right bones in the right place. This crazy construct is just tearing these skeletons apart. And I, reading this, thought it was really fucking cool that you could make skeletal constructs that weren't just skeleton shape, because we've never seen that before. Harrow is able to like take a small piece, but she basically just spawns like a human skeleton. And this seems like a very, very different energy than that. So it makes you wonder what are the limits on bone creature that one could create.
I feel a little vindicated for thinking that this was some sort of a Frankenstein lab last week.
Oh, hell yeah. I think you are vindicated. Every time Harrow like disengages, the whole construct becomes soup and just seeps away to grates in the floor and disappears.
Ooh, it's so cool. Spooky. I love that particular mechanism. Turns into soup. Bones turn to soup.
And so what does Gideon want to do with this?
She wants to fight it because the arms look like swords.
Infallible logic.
Makes sense to me.
The simplicity of Gideon is perfect comic relief. I think we've talked about this before of like Gideon is probably your comic relief character in like a different book, and having it from her perspective is actually incredible. It's not uninteresting. She's a wonderful, like literally think about, okay, this book could have been written from Harrow's perspective, right? She's the one who picks up on the clues. She goes hunting for doors. She is the primary character doing stuff here. Gideon is literally bored, trying to find something to spend her time. And that is what we've been getting for several chapters. We have been getting the non-dominant character's perspective, who is our comic relief character. It's great.
See, now I kind of want to see like more films and books that are written from the fun, funny sidekick character's perspective.
God, they do that sometimes. It's like, I'm going to rewrite my book from a different character's perspective. So
Ender's
I was like,
Game,
no,
Ender's
I've already
Shadow.
read that book.
I was going to say, literally last night, Josh and John and I were talking about Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow and how good those two are, and then how everything else that he wrote was shit. Anyway, we can read Orson Scott Card in our next podcast.
No, let's not. We can.
But Harrow's like, no, you can't fucking fight it. So she's just putting in skeleton after skeleton, multiple skeletons at a time. Gideon's like reporting back.
And then finally Gideon is just like, no. And she trips the skeletons and goes in and fights it.
That's my favorite part, is that like she didn't need to do that. She and the skeleton could have gone in together, but she's like, sorry, bud. Sticks out her leg, trips it up as it's going in.
Not this time. Me first.
So she hops in there and starts fighting it.
Gideon's good. I mean, we already knew that, but like this is kind of fun. I mean, she's clearly an intuitive fighter. Poor Harrow having to experience that.
Well, okay, what do you mean experience? Tell us what happens, Brooke.
All right. So what's going on is Gideon gets in there, and I don't think Gideon necessarily can recognize what's going on. What we hear is that Harrow is over the intercom, and she's like suddenly stuttering and like confused and like shrieking a little bit, like, and it turns out that Harrow has basically entered Gideon's body as a necromancer of a live person and is like trying to figure out her senses. And so she finally says, oh, look through one eye to like, I guess, try and like improve focus, which, okay. And so apparently she's in there and she's both experiencing probably Gideon's like, you know, physical sensation of movement. She's experiencing Gideon's decision-making process when of some sort. Well, I guess she's not experiencing her thoughts. She's not experiencing her memories. It's just her senses, right?
Proprioception.
Yeah.
I think that's like fair.
And it seems like it's overwhelming. Reading this, I was like just picturing like the scene in every like superhero movie ever where the person gets powers and they're just like overwhelmed until they like learn how to tune out. Like Daredevil, Spider-Man, like the lights are too bright, the noises are too loud. Just there's too much shit flying around in the air. Like it's just
Yes.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of surprising because like it's not like Gideon's living in the same world. Physics operate the same way for Harrow and Gideon. But initially I thought that Harrow was actually experiencing what it was like to be Gideon in not just a physical sense, but like in a mental sense, in which case that was very funny to consider.
Yeah, Gideon freaks out and she's like, you can read my mind. And Harrow's like, no, I cannot read your mind. And she's like, it's for your own protection. I imagined Crix's ass once.
I love, she says, no squatting in my lobes.
Gross. But so clearly that means that she's not having to get adjusted to like, I think, Gideon's thought process, which would be very interesting as a person to like walk into somebody's brains and kind of like get like washed over with somebody else's thought process. But even just the physical senses, I guess that is something entirely new, is controlling, I guess. Okay, no, I have a way of talking about this. Yes, because I had an ACL injury earlier this year. Just 2 weeks ago, I had surgery to repair it, and my leg forgot how to walk both times.
Oh, no.
Yes, it's so strange. And so I literally have had to start like reminding myself, okay, you activate this quad, you activate the glute back here, you have to pull up on the kneecap. Like all of these like very specific like sets of motions. When I put my left leg down, happens, no, don't need to think about it. A baby has to do this, right? Like I was walking kind of like a baby of like, don't know how to coordinate my muscles. And I think that must be kind of what it is. It's like, this is somebody else's body in the end. It functions a little bit differently than mine. And that's kind of where she's getting, whoa, how do your eyeballs even work?
And also this like, we make all of that kind of background, all of the things that we do, all the things we see and feel, we are able to kind of just filter into the normal everyday. But Harrow is experiencing every photon that Gideon is seeing, right? Like, I feel like it's because she hasn't figured out how to be chill about it yet. She's like too cognizant while she's inside of Gideon's mind. I mean, all of this is happening. And actually, one of the best parts of this is Gideon does not know this is happening, right? Gideon is just standing there with one eye closed, trying not to get stabbed to death by a fucking crazy bone storm golem.
Sorry, but opening both eyes now. Self-protection.
So Harrow shuts it down. She comes out, Bone Golem melts away. They meet in the outside room, and Harrow explains what's going on. And as we said, Gideon freaks out a little bit. But the key takeaway here is that the test wasn't fucking about whether Harrow could make a good skeleton warrior. The test is about her ability to do this process, to I think she says riding another human soul. Her ability to kind of get in Gideon's head and have this connection with her cavalier. So now they've got a handle on how to beat the test. Harrow needs to take some time, think about the theory, but they are ready. They now understand what they're going to need to do. So Harrow's like, I'm going to pass out for a bit. See you in a couple hours. And she passes out. Is there anything else y'all want to share about this chapter?
Let's do an SAT round a little bit. We have winnowing. Winnowing's a good word, and it's a big word for this chapter in particular, right?
Yes.
So winnowing is typically when you toss up the freshly threshed wheat, and you're letting all of the shell parts fly in the wind and leaving behind the grain, letting the chaff fly away and leaving just the grain that is a lot heavier and settles back down into your basket. This is a cute way of talking about separating the signal from the noise. One of my favorite words in this was tenebrous.
Ooh, we love that. We love a tenebrous overlord.
We have tenebrous and, what was the other one that means something about shadow, something about a moon?
Penumbral.
Penumbral. This is moon shadowing.
It didn't have anything to do with that, but my SAT round was etiolated. The etiolated outline or something of the third house twin when they're sneaking around. Etiolated is when your plants aren't getting enough light and they're growing long and spindly, trying to get light.
Which does feel like a good explanation of the pale third house twin, right?
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes her words don't actually make literal sense, and it's poetic, right?
It's got, the vibes perfectly fit.
Vibes are vibes.
Big fan.
All right, so I want to ask you one question before we keep going, which is, what are you like thinking and feeling now that you have your first sense of what actually exists in the facility?
I think it's interesting because the technology, it's like technology and necromancy. Like when she puts her hand down, like glass slides over it. It feels like it's like a sensory panel almost. And so we're continuing to world build where there's very advanced technology and then like they seemingly don't know how to work most of it at all, or like they're just trying to keep it going because they can't build anything new.
Yeah, it's the sense of like advanced technology and decay both at the same time.
Yes.
I guess all of this just goes to show that you can really only fight a mass of regenerating blade bones with teamwork. So it's a good thing the four of us are always an unstoppable team when it comes to wacky games. Speaking of, interstitial. Ghosts and You Might Die is my middle name. Welcome, dear listener. We know you've been working hard not being pulverized by a bone golem, so just sit back and relax as we play this week's game. Say my name, say my name. So, now that Gideon is Team Harrow all the way, she's been trying out all these sick epithets that Brooke was talking about. So we've got some Night Boss, some Gloom Mistress, Penumbral Lady, Tenebrous Overlord. Anyway, I thought it might be kind of a fun thing to get our own nicknames because I've never had one. So first, just to get in the mood, we're going to do a quick round of Harrow names. Y'all ready?
Yes.
Yes.
I think so. Okay, I'm going to go first. I stole mine from a Disney movie. Your most lugubriousness.
Well done.
Excellent. That was perfect. John, what do you got?
The Baroness of Bone.
Oh,
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, of course. I've got Stygian Sovereign.
Ooh, also excellent.
What is Stygian?
Like the river Styx.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, underworldly. And I went underworldly too. I went with Chthonic Queen.
How do you spell that?
It's CHTH.
With
and I don't know how to
difficulty.
pronounce it correctly.
It's
I think you
chthonic.
said it. Yeah, Chthonic Queen.
Nice.
You should all play Hades. That's an incredible game, by the way, just throwing that out there.
Those were some good names. Would they make Harrowheart crack a smile? No. But she'd let us follow her into a nest of hungry ghosts, so that's something. Let's try out a few for one another, though, right? Like, what do we got? What do we got for John? What name are we going to start calling John?
I'd call him a gentleman jester.
I like that a lot.
Oh, see, I spent way too long trying to get something to work with his punny ninth penitent name, which was Rigor Mordicus. And so now he's stuck with the immutable Lemurian because I ran out of time and patience with the thesaurus.
Immutable what?
Lemurian? A lemur
I don't know what that is.
a, like, wrathful ghost in, like, Roman mythology.
Like a poltergeist?
Kind of, yeah.
Lemurian. An immutable Lemurian. I mean, you have to wrap your mouth around it, and that's kind of fun. I did not mean that!
Jesus Christ.
We need an HR department. I went with, the noble canid companion because John sits home all day while the two dogs just run around him interrupting his Zoom meetings. But I can't wait for you to do other people, so do me.
Again, phrase it.
What do you got for Hannah?
Oh, something around hoarding bones or just like collecting bones, just like the
bone collector, period.
the benevolent bone collector or something.
I'm so happy.
Benevolent bone collector's great. I didn't get much original for you, so I just plain went with my feels, which was a peaceable wise woman.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know if that's like a nickname or an epithet. That's just like a description. Like, that's just an accurate description.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked...
It's going on my headstone.
I mean, I really liked Gideon's Gloom Mistress and Bone Empress for you, but I had to come up with something original, so we went with alliterative and Darkling Diva.
Ooh, love.
Do they all
love,
have to
love.
rhyme or at least get close? I feel like, not rhyme or alliteration, like something.
No, I feel like I like the alliteration sound a lot, which is like why I went with it. But actually, a lot of Gideons for Harrows are not alliterative at all. But I love it. I think we should gift Marie some names.
One of my options for Marie was an exothermic educator.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
I've got the TikTok temptress. In my head and my heart, Marie's just like serially online. I tried to come up with something with Reddit instead.
I do not do thirst traps, but I could try, I guess.
Marie, everything you do is a thirst trap.
Especially when she shows up fully painted in bone makeup.
Yes. All right, last but not least, let's do some good ones for Brooke.
I have the crepuscular Contessa, and I refuse to expound on that.
I don't know what corpuscular means. Crepuscular? What is this?
The type of creatures who are like most active at dawn and dusk.
That's correct. Huh. There's nocturnal, diurnal, and crepuscular.
Huh, pretty accurate, actually.
I love Contessa for Brooke. I went with microbe master.
I was going to go with something like dark, but cheese master, basically.
Cheese master!
Whenever like somebody mentions Brooke, I just picture wine and cheese is like kind of just what like comes to mind immediately.
I am a walking white woman, yes.
Well, not walking so good lately, but you will be again.
Oh, hush. She'll learn again. She's walking like a Glamine, and a Glamine is a sword master. So, all right. Well, I think it goes without saying that we will all answer only to those names from here on out. But before I pass out from the effort of coming up with those, let's make sure we take a minute for rampant speculation. Act 3. This calls for rigor, Nav. Rigor mortis. Now is the time when we ask. Sorry,
Because Gideon,
I'm so sorry.
like John, and like Hannah, and like me, probably not like Brooke.
No.
Not like Brooke at all.
Not a pun person.
Automatically thinks that a pun is funny.
She automatically thinks puns are funny, and she's right.
3 out of the 4 of us agree with Gideon.
Well, now is the time when we ask our incredibly dedicated and rigorous ninth newbies for their meticulously researched conspiracy theories. So, Brooke and John, what the fuck is happening?
Okay, so hear me out. I'm going full conspiracy.
We want it.
The next book is all about Harrow the Ninth, right? Mm-hmm. All I know about the next book is the title. Mm-hmm. So what if she, like, completely takes over Gideon's body, and Gideon is kind of, like, no more, or, like, shoved into, like, super subconscious, and, like, a lictor is actually 2 bodies in one, or 2 souls in one.
Oh, shit.
That's pretty bonkers.
I don't want to know what that oh shit means.
Look, that's where I was going. It's like we're gonna get 2 souls, 1 body. We're gonna get like a more like a merging type of thing as part of the process. Like that's the way that you. All right. Or my other conspiracy theory is that part of the way that this works is you just like to become these super powerful necromancers, you have to absorb the souls, and like the 10,000 unfed screaming ghosts are just fuel to the fire.
Oh my god, you expand your lifespan with other people's lives. Because 10,000? How many thousand?
It was 10,000 million, I think.
Okay, that's...
I think it's 10 billion.
A million, 10,000s.
Yes.
The math doesn't quite add up for 8 lictors, 10,000 years.
It's a conspiracy theory. It doesn't have to make all the sense in the world. It just has to sound good.
No.
Yeah. Both of those are real dark, too, which, makes sense for a book about necromancy.
You asked for a wild conspiracy theory.
Love it.
Oh, no, actually, you asked for meticulously researched, I suppose. But
I'm also throwing out the teacher might be the emperor. I'm throwing that out there. Just
oh my goodness, John!
I'm not sure, but like there's a small chance. I don't know. Like I'm just throwing it out there. Or he's just like, I don't know, we'll see.
I hadn't thought of that.
Well, I guess we'll see if any of that happens next time when John and Brooke join us for Gideon the Ninth chapters 15 and 16. Marie and I are headed into conspiracy spoiler land, but first, some announcements. I know you're all dying to get out your swords and have some more bone fights in response, but we are going to take 2 weeks off for the holidays. We will be back January 6th, 2025 with chapters 15 and 16. And if you, dear listener, are, like Brooke and John, reading along for the first time and signing off here before our spoiler section, make sure you find our reading calendar on our website, frontline5th.podbean.com, or follow us on Instagram or TikTok, which are both linked in the show notes. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can, and if you didn't like it, feel free to lie. So now head off to sleep, my baby necros. Mommy and Daddy have some deep spoilers to discuss.
Which one of you is Mommy and which one of you is Daddy?
I made it Mommy Marie and Daddy Hannah because Mommy Marie flows way too much.
But we can take turns.
I like that.
Anyway, get in, losers. We're going speculating.
Spoiler warning. This portion of the podcast is 98% spoilers and 2% snickering.
Seriously, we will spoil anything and everything in the series up through Nona the Ninth. If that's not what you want, turn back now. Act 4. The sum of all necromantic transgression. First off, holy fucking shit on those rampant speculation calls. We need dumber friends. Marie, we need to work on getting dumber people into our life.
No, it's fine. It's fine. But also...
That was amazing. That was an incredible call from both of them.
Also, we took 2 smart friends and only gave them 2 chapters a week and pressure and a homework situation. So what did we expect?
This is true. They're murder boarding themselves. Which, by the way, I've started, dear listener. I will share it with you maybe next week. But I feel like John and Brooke also are murder boarding. Brooke definitely takes notes.
Yeah. Well, and SAT time.
That was so fucking cute.
Of course.
But I love, so she's like, maybe, they take over Gideon's body, which of course is almost exactly the inverse.
Yeah.
So they both come up with this 2 souls become one thing for lictors. And then secondarily, John was like, or maybe you use a whole bunch of souls to power yourself. And I was like, 1, Harrow's entire birth story, and 2, God. So that was pretty fabulous.
Yep.
There's a lot to talk about this chapter, but
well, you have things you're pissy about with Harrow.
I have one thing I want to be pissy about.
Okay.
You all know I'm obsessed with Canaan House, so I am just 6,000ing it. But Harrow says at one point, I know Sextus is obsessed with dating the structure, but as usual, he's getting caught up in the details. What's important is the function. And I feel like this is actually a flaw of Harrow's, is to focus on function. And she literally just never looks at the big picture. And I think this is part of why she missed the fact that calves were going to be so important, right? She's thinking about function. She's like, the goal is to become an epic necromancer. I am the necromancer. Therefore, I'm the only part that matters. And clearly, if she had even at any point read the letter, listened to teacher, the numbers do not add up. There are 16, they become 8. She should have known that calves were going to be essential. All of the shit teacher says at the beginning is your cavalier and your necromancer need to work together. And it just cracks me up to no end that it's only once her cavalier goes into this room that she's like, oh.
Yeah. I feel like that's a pretty good thing to still be pissy at Harrow about. It's fine.
It's fine. Teamwork is adorable. I also, I'm a collaborative gamer. I'm not a video gamer, but I'm a board gamer, and I like collaborative games. And I really do just feel like all of these necromancers and calves could have just been lab mates, but no. All right. Now that I'm done being pissy, I do want to point out one thing. So last time we talked a little about these labs, and I couldn't remember which lab this winnowing challenge was in. But of course, and I can't believe I feel like such a complete doofus for not picking up on this the first 18 times I read it. Lab number 2 has the winnowing challenge because it's the second house challenge that
gives
Gideon the first.
Key.
Exactly. It gives you the second house key. The siphoning challenge that they do, we hear explicitly from other people, is Mercy's challenge. She's the 8th house. It's in laboratory 8. And so that's really explicit, but it's interesting to me that there are 10 labs. Right? The numbers do not add up. So this kind of goes into the shit that you wanted to talk about this week, which was in general.
What is lab 9? It is the 8-fold word. There should only be 8 labs.
So I guess the question is, what is lab 1 and what is lab 10?
Yes.
Because we know that 2 through 9 correspond to people who, would be saints, plus Anastasia who, asterisk.
Well, asterisk, but she didn't become a lictor, but she still had a piece of it.
She built a challenge, for sure. She's part of the 8-fold word. So I'm with you 100%. I think there's a clear discrepancy. There is some extra shit there.
Yeah. And this basically just comes to like what I wanted to talk about in this spoiler section, which is just math and the way that things do not add up, right? So
this week in SAT prep.
Yeah, this week in SAT prep, the math. So first, one thing that comes up in terms of numbers being really weird is the number of doors. So not just even the number of labs, because we already said this, right? It's like there's 10 labs, but we know it's the 8-fold word.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that there are 9 houses is because house number 1 is the emperor's house, but he didn't have a piece of the 8-fold word.
Although that doesn't mean that he didn't leave shit down there. Like, it would be interesting if he has experiments down there that are unrelated to this.
But it still does mean of like, what is the 10th lab? It still does leave it of like, what is the 10th lab? But in terms of the doors, so Harrow counts 775 doors, and she says 6 of them are locked. I think that the door count is weird. I think when she means that 6 of them are locked, I don't think that she's counting the hatch.
I don't think so either, because also, no, I think you're right. I don't know why I think you're right, but I think you're right.
I like reread it a few different times because she says there are 775 doors, 6 of them are locked. And then when she's describing it later, she says there were 2 lock points. One of them was the hatch and the other was a door.
Okay. So she's being quite specific about what makes a door. Yeah. I like that.
So I feel comfortable in saying that there were 775 doors that she counted. 6 of them are locked. Gideon gives her another door that gives you 776. 7 of them are locked.
Yes.
So that still means that there is another door that she's missing, which would give you 8 locked doors, 8 lictor labs, which means the number of doors is 777. 7 is the number of like in numerology and like biblical terms. 7 is a perfect number. That's why 666 is like the bad number, is because 6 is almost perfect.
Oh, interesting. It's like aspiring to be perfect, but not, that's fascinating.
7 is perfection. 10 is perfection. So 6 is an evil number because it's almost perfect, which means 9, it's never really used that way, but that's why 9 is a number that makes you kind of uneasy. Yeah. Because it's almost perfect.
Yeah.
So that's why 9 houses, like there's 9 houses because there's 9 planets, but there's also makes it kind of weird that it's 9, but there's also 10 labs.
Sorry. I mean, there's a lot of things here that make sense.
But there's another thing to it as well of like the reason that it was the 8-fold word is 8 in biblical terms or in biblical numerology is sometimes used to refer to things about resurrection or new life or new beginnings.
Interesting. Which is almost a little too on the nose. Like, that is exactly what this is. Yeah. I almost wonder, to be honest, I realize that there are 9 planets, but also there aren't 9 planets if you're going to do, like, technically Pluto's a dwarf planet.
But also, technically Anastasia was never a saint, and technically that house was never supposed to exist.
Yes. But so the question is, did he always want 8? I'm just now wondering, we know that he can kind of erase their memories and has done that. And so I almost wonder if there was a time period where there were 10 saints and 2 of them fucking failed out. Like, if there actually were 10 labs down there, which would be kind of interesting. I love the 777 thing. I think that's exactly right. And we know for sure, unequivocally, there have to be 8 locked doors because we know that there are 8 lictoral labs. The other thing you have written down here, and I really want to hear your thoughts on.
This definitely came from Reddit. And like, I can't take credit from this. Like, this came from like Reddit conversations about like the discrepancies of, they talk about the 10 billion that died and that essentially John killed the 10 billion probably even before the nuclear bomb went off.
Yes, that he basically extinguished life even before, and the reason the nuclear bomb went off was because it was basically on a dead man switch trigger.
But he killed them. He took the life to power his necromancy. And then it's like, okay, when he started resurrecting people, he hasn't resurrected 10 billion people.
No, definitely not. He's resurrected far fewer. And we know that he's keeping some in stasis because actually, weirdly, at the beginning of Harrow, one of the things he does is say that he's going to renew her house. And he has all of these coffins of bodies that he is pretty explicit were people he didn't resurrect, which means they're people from the pre-resurrection times that literally he's just been keeping in storage. It's a really weird conversation.
She says, you've committed resurrection. He says, no, I haven't done that. Oh, you're right. He didn't resurrect them.
Yes.
They've just been in stasis.
Yeah, he says, I haven't done that in 10,000 years, in a myriad. I'm going to do what I haven't done in a myriad and renew your house and resurrect these straight up bodies.
But also, in conversations in Nona, Alecto asks him where all of them are.
Because it's just her and him wandering the earth.
Right? And says, alludes to things or says things like he's left them too long. So there's a lot of theories that basically these devils or these things that are coming up, when you suck a soul out of a body and something comes back to possess it, or that things are going weird in the river, or the nastiness, the screaming ghosts that are in the river, or whatever is possessing, or the screaming unfed ghosts that are in the bottom of Canaan House, are these souls that are from whatever John did at this moment, and he's been using them to fuel his power. That it isn't just Alecto never totally became the same type of resurrection beast that all the other planets did. And instead, John has been using that power to fuel his necromancy. And so it's what has that been doing to the souls? Has it been transmuting them somehow so that they've turned into these devil type things?
That's really interesting, the idea of souls in use. And there's actually a weird moment that, we'll talk about it when we get there. There's quite a weird moment in Harrow when she thinks that in the river she can see the souls of specifically the children who went to power her birth, which I think is another interesting, what's the difference between when you actually are using a soul and its energy is being kind of transformed and it's in tension, as opposed to someone who just dies and their soul floats away. I really, really like the idea that the devils are pre-resurrection souls. I really like the idea, clearly, Teacher is so explicit. He says 10,000 million unfed ghosts. He could just say fuck tons of ghosts, but he's very clear about the 10 billion there.
Yep.
So I think it absolutely is the pre-resurrection ghosts. And he seeded John, John seeded the worlds, seeded his planets with souls. There are people, but we know the people don't even close to add up to 10 billion. Even if you took a couple million off, that's, there's basically 10 billion ghosts down there. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the devils ultimately are and how one even defeats them, or if one should be defeating them, and how much they are tied. We'll have to really think about how they respond to Alecto, to the soul of Earth, because I think that will be really interesting.
Part of the reason that they could get to the ninth house no problem was because all of a sudden they're not in the river anymore.
Right.
So
they're outside of the river. Oh, interesting.
Where did they go?
So it's intriguing.
The math doesn't add up. And that ends your SAT prep.
I have one other thing we could talk about in the spoiler section if you want, but we can talk about it next week. We get the first intimation. Basically, when Gideon is in response and Harrow is in imaging, and they realize that Harrow needs to sort of ride her soul and have her experiences, Gideon starts to have these moments where she can see kind of glows, auras, little halos around certain parts of the construct. And we'll learn later that Harrow's that's not fucking possible. And she actually doesn't say it as dismissively as I just did. The way she says it in the book is very much that shouldn't be possible. But Gideon can see the weak points. She can see thanergetic signatures. And I wanted to know from you what you think it is about Gideon. Like, is this being a child of God? Is this something inherent to Gideon alone? Because even necromancers shouldn't be able to see the thanergetic signatures. They can just kind of like calculate where they are, is my understanding.
I thought that maybe Harrow, if it was Harrow doing it, she might be able to see it.
Interesting. So then we're talking about a circumstance where necromancers can see it, and the reason Gideon can see it in this context is because they're doing a better job sharing. It's not just Harrow possessing Gideon, but like Gideon is having some of the experiences that Harrow is having, is experiencing some of the things that Harrow's brain is also giving back.
That was more of my read from it. And yeah, we'll have to see next week.
Yeah.
Or the next 2 weeks. Next episode.
Sounds good. Act 5. See you next time, my little nunlets. Well, it looks like I'm going to pass out for a while now, but don't worry. We'll be back in 3 weeks with episode 8. Is that right? I can't believe we're on episode 8 already. To attend a party and a funeral in chapters 15 and 16. If you want to follow along with us, our reading calendar is available on our website at frontline5th.podbean.com, and you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok, which are linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends. You have no idea how much of, like, it just fills my heart with joy every time I see a new download. And give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can. And of course, if you don't enjoy the podcast, feel free to lie. Finally, if you have any fun theories you'd like to share with us, or opinions about the theories we shared today, feel free to email us at frontline5th@gmail.com. And with that, I'll just remind you not to unlock any tombs or enter any doors without permission, because, you know, ghost devilly things. Bye!
Frontline Fifth is a Locked Tomb podcast conceived by Maria Adamako and starring Maria Adamako, Hannah Grenwald, Brooke Anderson, and John Ryan. Our cover art was designed and created by Maria Adamako, who also edited this episode. Our fabulous music was composed and recorded by Blake Anderson. The Locked Tomb series is a completely dope-ass book series by Tamsin Muir, who does not know we exist and is in no way affiliated with this podcast.
Nice.